What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Bourbon Tie-In. This is Bobby, and tonight we're getting back to basics again. So, why the basics? What's all about the basics, right? So, man, it's just about let's go back and make sure we understand what we're doing, and the new people coming in, make sure they understand and how to have the best experience you can have. So, what's in here? Cheech is in here. Love you, Cheech. Sugar Kitty, Independent Joe, Daniel H. James Morgan, what's up, guys? Let me scroll back up here, make sure I didn't miss anybody. Bourbon Ballers in the house. What's up, Marty? Whiskey Nose is in here. Yeah, so a lot of different guys in here. Love you all. Glad you could jump in. James Morgan's in here. The kitty's in here. So happy to have you guys in here. So yeah, we're going to go through and really just take it back to understanding. And there's probably a good chance that a lot of you know a lot of this. This is in case you didn't, right? And we want to make sure that we are advancing everybody as much as possible so that when you're going to the store to make this purchase is what you're doing. What's up, Adam? Glad you could jump in, Mr. Whiskey Shites. Making an educated and informed purchase. So there's certain things that we're going to talk about that you would find on the label, and why is it significant? What is required to be on that label? And then what do you care about on that label, right? So both those things are a little bit different. So in the meantime, before we get started, I always like to give a little bit of time first. What's everybody drinking tonight? What's everybody, if you're smoking, are you having one? I am. Me and the Gunny. The Gunny is in the house. We're both on AJ Fernandez New World because we love it. However, we're down to our last two. That's sad. That's like really sad.
I'm really sad.
A moment of silence. However, we have a new orders in. And so with those new orders will come new stuff plus more New World AJ Fernandez, which is incredible. I'm looking here. There might be another guest pop in the house tonight, which is exciting. I'm letting him know where to go. Come in through the back deck. So when he's out there, I'll tell the Gunny will bring him in. My best friend and a big supporter of Bourbon Tie-In here locally is my buddy Ken. And he's the guy that I go fishing with twice a year in the backcountry. We go fly fishing. We've done it for, I think, 15 years now. So what's up, Jeffrey Wack? Cheers, buddy. Glad you guys could jump on. So yeah, I just want to kind of hang out and talk a little bit before I really dive into this, right? Because I really want Ken to be here as well. And I want to know what you guys are drinking. And the stuff you're drinking, take a gander at the label and really look at all the different things on the label, right? Because that's what we're going to be talking about. And one of the things that you're going to really be focused on is there's actually two words that are 2 letters each that really matter. Daniel H., he said, awesome. Man, glad to hear. He just got 20 new cigars in. Pretty excited about that. At Mr. Whiskey Shits. Hey, dude, no doubt about it. Independent Joe, I'm so glad you're in it. What's up, John T? John, the legend Trombetta. Freaking Navy Squid. Yut.
Yut.
Certified taxi driver. So we can't get there without you. Now, and so, it's been this really interesting thing when you're taking the time to go through and really dive into stewardship and all that kind of stuff to bring to is just getting back to how do I get the most knowledge to better prepare myself for what I'm doing, and also to give me a better idea is what I'm expecting to get what I'm actually getting. And although we know a lot, there's also a lot of little things that maybe we do or don't know. And so that's what I'm hoping in this whole entire series. He's like, funny jarhead. Yeah, I wear that badge and that name with pride.
Why transparency is so paramount.
Yeah, so I'm really, really excited about the idea of helping people get there. That's why I changed every thing back down to just hour segments, right? Leading up to the MASH. The MASH is doing cool things over there, and he has a lot of stuff, and he's got a great palate. He's got a lot of opportunity to share different tastes of profiles of things that you'll know ahead of time. And so I want to give him his due diligence. I think it's really important to make sure you find a multitude of people in the community to help you grow your knowledge, whether it's a understanding the instructional side of the house, or even understanding and trusting someone's palate that gets to try stuff that's really expensive or mildly expensive before you to know if it's something you even want to purchase, if they have the same palate as you. So it might require you to go back to old videos, find out something that you like, and look back a ways back to figure out what did they think of it, and then do some evaluation. It's like, oh, hey, this guy's kind of on point with me. So there's a good amount of people in the community to do that for. You can go back to ADHD, Matt Porter. It's Bourbon Night, who honestly is probably the one everybody started with. Going back to Chad and Sarah, you got the Whiskey Tribe, Daniel and Rex. They do a great job of having no bias towards anything. They'll try anything, but they'll give you a real honest opinion. And just finding those different people out there that are doing that. You know, Lance, the Whiskey Tornado, does a great job. If you haven't subbed Lance, you should. I think he runs a really, really top shelf kind of thought process in what he does. Look at Top Shelf. Those Dustin and those guys that are down there with the Top Shelf, they're literally cracking stuff that you and I would absolutely pass on just for a price point. But if they're telling me it's amazing, then it's maybe I'll save up and I will look at, hey, maybe that's something worth getting. And they do a lot towards the Scotch, bourbon, and whiskey as a community, right? So I think all that stuff is really important to pay attention to. So you might have to check the back deck. I don't know if he's here yet, but he said he's on his way. You can just, once he comes up here, Steve, just bring him back. So let's go into a couple of certain things that we're talking about when we get into the idea of things to know and then what's actually required. So requirements, right? No bottle is allowed to be labeled in a way to deceive the consumer. A perfect example would be single barrel. In the fact that it says single barrel, it leads us to believe that this came from a single barrel. Having said that, in the law of the label, they can't be deceiving. We can assume, and they could be called out on the idea of a single barrel must come from one single barrel. And I think those are the things that, that are really important understanding. What they're actually required plus what we think, right? So we're going to put to bed some myths, stuff like that. Probably, what Jeff put up here. Jeff put up here. That is what I learned years ago. Bought a bottle, sipped it for about 36 minutes. Side-by-side watching reviews with it. Absolutely. I did the same thing. I mean, I was doing it a long time with the Gunny, but when people started doing it, we started doing it too, right? Everybody, actually back then, Chad and Sarah and Rux and Daniel, they were the ones we watched. And they would pull out something to do it with. We would pull out with them and do it with them. And it would be nothing more than that. Is he here yet?
Not yet.
And so when you start looking at the overall anatomy of a label, a couple of things to look at. So I have two examples here, right? I have Magnolia and I have Cooper's Craft, right? So in that, there's things we're going to read on the label, right? So the one thing is we have Magnolia, and on the label it says bottled and bond. Most of you in this chat, because I know most of you, know what bottled and bond means. But to someone that doesn't know what that means, there's certain things that are required for that to have that statement. It also down here says whiskey. That's important because that tells me what they have in here is whiskey. What does that make it not be? It's not bourbon, right? Because they have whiskey in here, it's not bourbon. So what makes this the whiskey, right? Well, down here, they're required to tell you the overall size of the bottle, and this stuff they have to do metrically. That's required. It's a metric. So 750 milliliters is what this bottle is. They're required to say what the overall metric volume of the bottle is. Next to it, it says it's 95% rye. Are they required to put that on there? No, they're not required to do it. The fact that it's a whiskey means that it's not a bourbon. So there's limitations to what they have to do. Magnolia does an incredible job of being completely transparent, but they didn't have to be. What they have to do is they have to tell you the proof, and they give you an ABV. But we know all bottled and bond must be 100 proof. Therefore, it's 50% ABV, which is alcohol by volume. And then they give other things. The other things that they have to give is they have to give warnings, medical warnings, right? They have to give warnings, which is a different health warning. They have to give an alcohol content. They have to give the name and the address. Now, this is where things get really important. Remember I said there's two words that are really important. In there, they must say distilled in or distilled by. That in and that by matters. It matters a ton. If you hear distilled by, typically, on the average, that's going to be they are the distillers. Distilled in means it's distilled in somewhere else and brought back for sourcing. So this one says distilled in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, bottled by Noble Cut Distillery in Gahanna, Ohio. Now, on the opposite side of that, we have Cooper Craft, right? Produced and bottled by Brown-Forman Beverages, Louisville, Kentucky. Therefore, we have the by. Who's doing it or where's it coming from? And that's one of the biggest things you want to know. Is what you're drinking distilled by them or is it sourced by them? Doesn't mean that it's bad stuff if it's not, right? We all know MGP is good stuff. We know there's a lot of good sourcing outfits out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But understanding those key little nuances are so important. The brand name, it is always required that there's a brand name that's very legible, not deceiving, straightforward. This one, big label of Magnolia. This one has a big Cooper's Craft, right? So they have to do that. Plus, they have to have the class type designation. Meaning, is it a bourbon? Is it a whiskey? Here, we see that this one has a very big designation. It says Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. That tells me a lot. This tells me that it's bottled and bond and it's a whiskey. Now, whiskey is technically a classification. It doesn't have to say rye whiskey. What's up, Shane Long? So you have to understand what it is you're doing. When it says whiskey, you know right away it does not fall in the classification of a bourbon. So you don't want to go out and talk about, hey, how much wealth of knowledge I've learned and all that stuff, and say, man, this is some really good bourbon. And they're like, excuse me. So educate yourself, not because you have to do it to look cool, because you want to be really correct in the idea, because the idea of sipping and tasting with a friend is giving them an informational thought process to how to increase their journey. James, it's only because you know me. Get to the good bit where he pops and cork and pours. I am drinking some, but if you do know me, and if you don't know me, you'll know more about me, right? Because I've come back to not only the roots of whiskey, but the roots of my heart, right? I am truly an instructor by trade. That's what I enjoy the most in life, is really helping someone to have a better understanding and more information. Because if we remember from our youth, information is power. So we want to inform people as much as we can. So when you do all that, there's a lot of things you're taking into notes, right? You're like looking at this. And when you're doing that, you're trying to figure out all this different stuff. And it's so funny to go through and actually look at all the different stuff you can figure out that you may have not even noticed, right? It's just like, what? I didn't even know that. So what you have to know is, what does something mean if it's a bourbon, right? So most of us know there's certain classifications that make something a bourbon. What's up, Ken?
Hey.
So a bourbon requires 6 different things, right? In order to be a bourbon, one, it must be produced in the United States. It has to be produced in the United States. It must be made from at least 51% corn. 51% corn mash bill is required. Outside of that, it has to be distilled at 160 proof or below. And it also must be put into a container at no more than 125 proof. Right. And I'm looking at it because I just want to make sure that I'm given the exacts, right? Because it's really easy to be like, I think I know this, and I don't want to mess it up. So I am looking at my notes. It must be in a new charred oak container. I will say that again, container. So you could have moonshine, white lightning, doesn't matter what you call it. As long as it meets the mash bill, you could literally take it and have a brand new charred oak wood container. And I could literally pour it in and pour it right back out, bourbon. There is no age statement required. It is just required to be a brand new charred American oak container. It must be free from any added substances. So bourbon is the only one of all the whiskeys in the world that has that statement. You're like, wait a second. My Scotch isn't allowed to be flavored. No, but it's allowed to be colored. My Canadian is allowed to be colored and flavored. So that's why you run into this. No added substances at all. The color must be a derivative from the char of the new oak barrel. The mash must be from the natural grain mash. So everything has what a box cover requirements. Absolutely. If it was a brand new American oak box that you charred and you poured your moonshine in it and poured it right out, it's a bourbon. Anything outside of that is totally a myth. It is not required to have an age statement. It don't even have to have a dark color. Let me tell you, if you pour char in there, come out, and it's going to be like really, really like, I don't know, shiny. Now, I mean, you're a little bit more graphic, right? You're going to say it's going to be like shit. Yeah, maybe. If your grain was really good though,
Your red was good.
I've had some good ones. I've had some good moonshine it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a barrel. That's totally a myth. It just is if anybody's going to produce something, then you're going to produce it the best you can be. And people are going to expect a color, a taste profile, and all that kind of stuff, right? And a lot of that really good savory flavors that you're getting, that are all your sweet notes, fruit notes, and all that stuff, are typically coming from the barrel and the chars. So those things are mattered. So when you have something that says bourbon, you know what you're getting. Now the difference is, let's look at Cooper's Craft. This guy says it's Kentucky straight. Kentucky and straight are two different terms. I could have had this just say Kentucky bourbon, but they went a step further and said Kentucky straight. Now they put themselves in a corner, and I'll expand on that, right? So Kentucky bourbon means it must be produced and distilled in the same state of Kentucky and barreled for at least 1 year. And that's it. What's up, Zach? However, they said Kentucky straight. Now, they could have taken the Kentucky off, right? Because you can have bourbon anywhere in America. It's not just singled out to Kentucky. The thing about straight bourbon is now they have a designator, and that designator requires them to have this, has to be aged for at least 2 years. Must be aged in a barrel for 2 years. However, if it isn't aged longer than 4 years, they have to put an age statement on it. That is required. So if you look at your fancy Cooper's Craft, this ain't the fancy one. This is just the average one. But it's Kentucky straight. And if I look through here and I don't see anything that says barreled for at least 3 years or 2 years, whatever, it has no other age statement, that means they were required by law to be over 4 years. So you know that this really cheap bottle of 82.2 proof Kentucky straight bourbon is at least 4 years old in the barrel, produced and done in Kentucky. So there's a lot of things to understand. Kentucky straight is not a term. Kentucky's a term, straight's a term. Married together, it's like a compound, right? I've taken what you know about it being from Kentucky, what you know about it being straight, and I've merged that into a solid statement of this is what we're dealing with. So in that, when you're looking at this label, that's the things you're looking for. If it's bottled to bond, you know you have X, right? And we just talked about, bottled to bond and what that takes, right? It's 100 proof, has to come out of this, has to be in this barrel, can't be nowhere. Now, just because they said it can't be barreled anymore above 125 proof, doesn't mean that the angel share, the evaporation process, isn't going to leave, right? So the second that you deal with the evaporation of water, it proofs it up in the same way that adding water proofs it down. So you might put something in, you might see a barrel proof that went into the barrel no more than 125, but it came out 130. Well, that's the angel share, right? That evaporation process. And so those are the things that you're really paying attention to and understanding that. So why do you find a lot of people really on barrel strength, right? So barrel strength, cask strength, there's a lot of terms for it. It means that in that, I'm having it right now, Zach. Yes, I will reach out to you. But what you have to look at is the overall idea of when you're going in here to purchase something, am I purchasing something that is worth the price point I'm paying? And that's going to be your flavor, your palate, and what you learn from the label and what you've researched on your own. And that's being a tough light. Fire that back up. That's what happens when you talk too much and smoke cigars. Yes, so we are having cigars and pairing with it as well. I don't typically smoke in the house. However, the other day, the wife was like, cigar smoke smelled. Oh, don't say noob. I'll tell you what, I got an elbow for that shit, Zach. She said it smelled better than the animals. I was like, you're welcome. So my buddy Ken's here. How long have we been fishing?
12 12 years.
Is it 12?
Yeah.
Are you sure? I thought it was 15.
Use whatever number you want.
I just couldn't remember for sure how many years we've been doing it.
It's in the teens. It's in the teens, close enough.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I do take whiskey in the backcountry when we go.
Can you grab that? Cooper's Craft.
And so I help. I would like to think that I help Ken on his whiskey journey, and the idea of what is this, what's it taste like, and all that stuff. So he does drink whiskey now. Now he doesn't do it neat, and that's perfectly fine, right? Because the idea is an experience.
He does it his way.
Yeah, your way is the right way, always. Independent Joe, 13.5 years. Yeah. Joe, you ain't wrong. Lord Schlong. I'll tell you what, Shane, noob. I'll tell you what. What's up, Mike Stahl? Glad to jump on. Zach's like, you must be old. Unfortunately, older than you, but not nearly as old as Anthony in Bourbon Neophyte. That guy's ancient. So, but now getting into a little bit more about it, right? So what have we talked about? Federal requirements. It requires them to give a proof. They must have a health warning. They must have a name brand. They must say distillation, where they don't have to say where technically it's distilled, because some people don't, but they can't claim it's by them if it's not them. They must give, the proof point, the size, and the size must be metric, which is weird because in the U.S. nobody does metric. So 750 milliliters is a pain in the ass when you're trying to figure out. They give you all these jiggers, and the jiggers are based on ounces, and you're like, ugh. And in that, some of them are actually nice enough to give you some really important notes on the back. They'll tell you, maybe a mash bill. There's a certain company out there that doesn't tell you anything, which is why I think over time, with the transparency of a lot of the craft, and you're going and getting certain crafts that are really good craft, and they're telling you everything. Like I'll tell you, Magnolia, for example. They tell you it's 95% rye. It's under license from Magnolia. It's 100 proof. What batch number it is. Where did it come from? It's distilled in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. It's aged for 4 years in charred white American oak barrels. They don't have to write that. They do not have a federal requirement to put that on there. And the fact that they do makes me like it. Yeah, it's a little over 25 ounces. You're right. Yeah, because I literally have to map out all the pours to know how many pours I get out of a bottle. So, Independent Joe, children, please. No. What's up? Mike and Shane, you both suck it. No doubt about it. No, but I love all you guys. It's so much fun going through and helping this. And I hope that for someone that's new, that's out there trying to find their way through this, right? Because every year we have new people coming in and they're not ready to go to a cast strength, and it's our due diligence to be able to say, hey, listen, my two favorite terms, palate evolution and palate acclimation. You have to take the time to evolve your palate. And in every step of the way, you must acclimate your palate. And once you do that, you'll find that over time, you might find yourself shifting a certain way. It's always good to reset and go back. When you think that you only want cast strength, like most of us, like almost everybody in here that I see. What's up, DC? I almost missed you up there, buddy. Tony Two Toes. Anthony, what's up, buddy? Sometimes you have to go back. You're like, wow, does this really good to me? And don't question just the fact do I think this is good? talk about or think about how would this be good for someone new? Are they going to want to come in? There's going to be someone coming in that's going to taste an 80 proof and be like, whew, that's hot. You know what? We barely say that now at 120 proof. We're like, eh. I've literally been on some high proof stuff and I'm like, man, what is that, like 107? Because I've been away from the 107 and below so long, I've gotten so away from it. And, you know, and you find like, I mean, I look at a perfect example, right? The Gunny, your proof point has changed drastically. You are 107 and below almost religiously. And what, in the past couple weeks, we've been on Smoke Wagon, Uncut, Unfiltered. Everything we've been is almost 115 and up.
Appreciation is what it is.
Right.
You got to understand what it is.
Well, I think the idea is also to understand that your palate's going to evolve and things that were hot before and maybe not so hot anymore. You're going to start looking at how things taste and how they feel and how they, all that kind of stuff matters. And I am just literally drinking Cooper's Craft. This is actually what I'm actually sipping on tonight. Because I wanted to, I've been doing a little bit more of this reset of 100 proof back. I still drink all my high proof, trust me. I have 8 empty bottles that I bottle killed. I bottle killed 7 yesterday on my Instagram. I'm like, go.
What mama wants, mama gets. Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that's the thing that's so cool is going back and reset so that when you have a friend over or you're talking to someone, you have really good information about what's going on with it.
I do most of my drinking anyway.
Yeah.
Shane, brother, those dropped a long time ago.
Oh.
It's just now it's like this evolution and this overall because like if you don't drink a lot of it, right? If you're not drinking very often, and quite honestly, before we really spend a lot of time focusing on that, we've realized that, hey, you know, those kind of things, if you drank 100 to 107, let's say, and that was your staple, and then you start venturing outside of it. But that's what brings the craft world, right? Like when you talk about story time, right? I'm a member of story time.
Yeah.
The story time picks. What is the significant difference today with crafts versus our traditionals, right? When you think of traditionals, for me, when I think of traditionals, I think of Beam, Jack Daniels, which is not a bourbon, Turkey,
Yeah, I read 330.
Brown Forman, Stitzel Weller, Heaven Hills. You think of all these different people, you know, they're going to give you a product. What these craft guys are doing, Smoke Wagon, Magnolia, Driftless Glen, Cat's Eye, I mean, Nulu. There's so many different crafts, and they're doing so much awesome finishing, and they're pushing it, right? They're pushing it. They're doing it in different beer barrels. They're doing it with all this different stuff. Well, now that proof point isn't such a thing because there's so much complexity. You're tasting stuff, and you're like, whoa. I want to know when I taste something like, whoa, what is this? I literally love this thought process of trying to figure out what is all this to me. And then how do I turn that over and give that information to someone else? And it's such a cool experience. And I think that's why the craft is on such a boom right now, because they're doing some really interesting stuff. You know, Cedar Ridge out in Iowa is doing some cool stuff. And there's just so many craft distilleries popping up everywhere. And they're like, hey, what can we do and still have these classifications that fall in this federal guideline? And some of them are like, screw the federal guideline. I'm just going to be a whiskey and not really care about it. You know, so hey, I'm going to make this rye that's 51% rye and 48% corn, which gives me 2% malted barley. It's just, there's so much difference that's out there, right? And I think that's why you look at the trend, what's everybody jumping on? Crafts right now. You're talking about, you know, whether it be stave processes, which is adding different staves, talking about barreling processes, double
Same thing with
barreling,
beer went through.
helping to go
Wine.
through and do all this kind of stuff.
It's just
You know, and
their
it's really symbolic to the idea that, like, you know, there's some talk in the background, and what they were talking about is like, wow, this is really similar to what happened with beer, right? You had your domestics and you had your foreigns. Now you have all these craft distilleries, right? You can go almost anywhere, and within 50 miles of you, there's multiple breweries, and they're doing so much different stuff, right? So I think it's incredibly synonymous to the idea of what is happening with whiskey. And London engines today, damn gory, but fun of. Yeah.
That fit me.
The crafts are thinking outside the box.
Yeah, they're just thinking of like,
Outside the box.
how do you think outside the box?
That fit me.
I know it'll fit you. You ain't taking that one though. You know, that's got to be like the most unused hat ever in the world. So my buddy Ken walked over and was like, hey, I see this hat. And it's my Kentucky Bourbon Trail finished the tour hat signed by Jimmy Russell. And it actually has a wild turkey on the side. I was like, yeah, no, we don't wear that hat. If that hat left my house, there's only one hat wearing full I know it would go to.
There's only one reason, because you're not here anymore.
And I'm dead or the gunny stole it. One or the other. But you all know that that's where the gunny started his journey, was with turkey. So, but I did get a chance to go down and have him sign a bottle of Turkey 101 and bring back to you.
Got it.
Yep. I gave him the bottle and I kept the hat. So I'm like, I should have, I don't know why I didn't get two
Well,
bottles.
wait a minute. What?
You're like, what? There's a hat too? Can't have the hat too. It depends. What are you willing to give up? You have some stuff.
Ouch.
I know what's up in your bar.
Mm.
What's that hat worth to you?
Mm.
What's funny is you'd never wear it. You never wear it. It would sit up on your hat rack like it is on mine. So.
Going through this pretty fast.
So how many of you guys, when you sit there and are out shopping, really take a lot of time to look at the label instead of just doing a, hey, I've followed some people. These people have said that they really like this and I trust their palate. And I'm going to go with that because I trust them. No matter what I go and look at, I always still look at the bear. I look at the label completely. Yeah, Independent Joe does. I know I do. What's up, Marty? Glad you could jump in, brother. I just want to know. And you know, so I'm like a twofold person. One, I want to know the knowledge of the label. I want to know how transparent they're being. I also want to know how non-transparent they're being. What are you not telling me that you could? You know, I would say across the board, I wouldn't say 100%, but I would say probably the most agitated group of people, and you look at who agitates you the most in transparency. Easily, hands down, Buffalo Trace. Buffalo Trace don't tell you jack shit. They tell you the basic, absolute, complete minimal that they can tell you, which sucks. Yep. Bourbon Baller, I agree with that. That's why I'm going to highlight it. I always check bottles for false advertising. Absolutely. I definitely do. Tony is like the same thing. When I find something that's new, I check the label all the time. You know, and I hope that through this, we understand how important it is to share that knowledge with friends and people that we've come in contact with on our feeds and just in general, is the idea of how do we empower them to make a better thing? Except for the experimental series, right? Okay, well, there's a reason why they did it with that. But it would be really nice to have some kind of ballpark on some of the other stuff. It's not like someone's going to actually recreate it. If that's the case, then wouldn't everybody recreated everybody else that was actually honest?
experimental series is outside the box.
Yeah.
And I want to learn outside the box.
Danwich. Yeah, the experimental series from Buffalo Trace will make you get tired of reading. Dude, I barely read. Listen, the thing I read more than anything else on earth is my chats. Sugar Key, I find myself reading Scotch labels more often, mostly because the American ones I've already researched the bottle. You know what? You're not wrong, right? There's just as much to learn from the Scotches, right? And there's actually quite a bit more, way more. Bourbon is probably overall the most simple. The highest, there's no liquid in America that is federally scrutinized as much as bourbon. However, when you start talking about scotches, there's so much more complexity to what makes something, all the different variations of types of scotches, right? Whether you're talking about the malts or everything that goes with that, right? Same with Irish, also same with Canadian, right? Canadian, they can literally add flavoring, they can add color. They have a lot of different things that they're doing with it. Now, one of the things is that they cannot add flavor to a bourbon and all that stuff and it still be a bourbon, and unless it was a bourbon and the flavoring came from another brand new charred oak barrel, but they must disclaim it. There must be a disclaimer. So you can have, think for like Woodford, right? Woodford's always had Woodford double oak, but they're required to say, hey, this is double oak. And what do you get with double oak? Well, it's a double barreling process. And in that double barreling process, that must be a brand new charred American oak barrel. Now it can have a different char, and that's what most of the time double oak means. They've taken a number 3 or number 4 char whiskey that was in a barrel for X amount of time and put it into another brand new toasted barrel. And they take from one of the 3 toasts to get this sweetness to bring it into that maturation of the oak of the older one with a heavier char for a complexity, right? So you're talking about, well, why does everybody, you always hear everybody saying, hey, they're really looking at, I would really like to get a toasted barrel. It's sweet.
Angel's Envy is a good example because it's called, the name of it, official name of it is bourbon finished in X.
Yep. And they've always been pretty straightforward about it, right? Whether it's, you think of the bourbon, it's finished in port. The rye is finished in Caribbean rum.
That's the name of it.
Yep. And so they're being really straightforward with you and what they're doing and why and how. But they've had to do this process and they have to follow the laws in order for them to do that. And that's really heavily mandated. What's going on up here? Daniel and Zach. You guys are clowns. So, but I love you both. We're definitely due for like some kind of like weird sit down powwow. So for the continuation of the series, we're going to step through all of the different things that are required in whiskey stewardship. And that's what my goal is, to really talk and spend time helping everybody to understand how they can be an advocate for their bourbon, their whiskey, and what that entails, so that when you're talking intelligently. Yeah, the other end of the spectrum is definitely Japanese, right? They're starting to try to clean that up. Yep. And that's one of the weird things, right? When you look at the overall perspective of becoming a Kentucky bourbon steward, Canadians, you have to study Canadian, you have to study Irish, you have to study Scotch. There is no Japanese study because it's so off the wall, 16,000 weird things of what it is.
I'm going golfing tomorrow.
And so I'm hoping that they really clean that up. That would be really nice to have some kind of actual thought process to what are you getting from that Japanese whiskey. We know some of them are really good. We know some of them are absolutely garbage. And some of them that sound like they would be garbage are
I'll
actually
drive if you want
really
to go
good.
someday.
Are
I
really
know
good.
you can't.
It's the
I
stops
understand.
along the way.
But
It's the stops along the way. How long does it take to get from Louisville to Lexington? 2 days.
yeah, we're not that far from. Well, yeah,
How
for
long does it
me,
take to how long does it take to get between the two? 2 days.
yeah, at least 2 days, maybe 3.
$1,500.
1,500. But yeah, we definitely need to do I need to do another trail when it's all open. I don't want to go until it's absolutely completely
A
open.
label reading field trip.
Yeah, we'll put it down as a classification information trip.
Professional development.
Excuse me, can I look at your X bottle that you don't sell to make sure it's grammatically correct?
He's got a kick-ass professional development budget.
Finally home from work. What's up, Samurai? Glad you got home from work.
Cheers to being home from work.
Yeah, I got home from work. Well, I left. I don't even know how that. I can't even talk about that. I work from home, and my wife's a teacher, so I actually have the house to myself. So it feels like vacation every day until summertime when she's off, and then it feels like work. So we're in the last 10 minutes, right, of talking about the labels and all that kind of stuff. So really take the time to look at the key features of a label, right? And the things that we're concerned with. Is it distilled in or distilled by? By means it's typically not sourced. Distilled in means it's sourced. Distilled in Indiana, distilled in something else, distilled, and that, and the in is more about in some other place. Distilled by is by that person, bottled and produced by Whittle Stiller, George Foreman, or not George Foreman. That's funny, Brown Foreman. And I was thinking boxing, like that makes me want to go get like a George Foreman grill and throw it like steak on it. It'd be terrible, but I haven't had steak since the Schwammering. And we all know what happens when I had steak at the Schwammering. At least Stahl does. Stahl, where you at in here? Dirty freaking camera freak coming in here taking silent videos of me while I'm sleeping.
My beer.
So, yeah, take the time to understand what you're reading and what it means. If it's bottled and bond, look up the terms. You know what it is with bottled and bond. If it's a whiskey, you know it's not
After I
bourbon.
drink this,
A lot of times, there's a couple different places that you can go online and ask and literally look at what is the mash bill of this. Most of them
That's a bad
will
sign.
tell you.
Talking bourbon.
Most of them will tell you what the mash bill is. There's a couple that won't, but there's thought processes. People are trying to break it down. It's more about the idea of finding out what you like, but being informed enough to not only find what you like, but to be able to direct someone else, right? Because we know the one thing about whiskey, it's best with friends. Family and friends. There ain't no better way to have your whiskey or your beer with friends and family. And how do you make that process even longer and better? You had a cigar. Had a cigar. Why are you like waiting to add a cigar? You're not inhaling it. You can be like Bill Clinton. I did not inhale. We don't inhale cigars. Now, we also don't do other things with cigars, you know, I'm just saying. But, you know, it's the idea of just.
It's a hazy.
So what happens with it, right? A cigar gives you the availability to do pairing notes. In that, it also takes a little bit longer time, right? Because you don't sip all that often. You smoke until it's time to sip.
Citrus.
Now, I will say this, and I'll preface this last little bit of about what's going on and what's coming up and that stuff. So one of the things that I'm doing as the Bourbon Tie-in through Storytime is we're going through and we're procuring subscriptions. And these subscriptions will be Bourbon Tie-in subscriptions through Storytime of whiskey cigar pairings. There will be notes flavor notes on the cigars. There'll be flavor notes for the whiskey. There will be a thought process in there. That will be a byline at the bottom that if you are a whiskey guy, you want to do X. If you're a cigar guy, you want to do Y. What the thought is if you're trying to pair your whiskey to your cigar, you do not add whiskey until you have the full acclimation of the cigar. You have to have the cigar. You have to taste the cigar, get it acclimated to the cigar the same way you would do a whiskey, and then figure out for you what whiskey sounds like or feels like it would pair to it and why, and vice versa. You do the same thing. This is my favorite bourbon. I really like it, or my favorite whiskey. I want to find a cigar that pairs to it. And in that, it's the idea of I need to acclimate, get truly in depth into this overall complete consumption of my bourbon before I introduce the cigar. And there may be a time that your bourbon or your cigar is on point, and you absolutely might want to have this overall true thought of I may or may not need a whiskey or a bourbon to make this experience amazing.
Left-handed shooter.
But if it does, understand that that's part of the process. You really want to spend some time with that.
Who's the leading actor and who's the supporting actor?
Yeah, leading role, supporting role. And focus on the lead role and let the supporting role do its job. And it will really, really, really help you to focus on this journey. You can take a 3-ounce pour
Good for a shooter.
and a good cigar and make that last for an hour and a half, sometimes 2,
Stop writing it.
depending on the ring gauge and the length of your cigar. Because the process is a truly, and listen, most of us that are in this community, somewhere in our minds, we've sit there and listened to like Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin or some, Louis Armstrong, blues, jazz, schooner music, whatever. And you're like, man, I'm in the wrong era. I just want to sit in a black tie at a lounge full of smoke with my cigar, sipping on bourbon, listen to Frank or Dean or somebody belt something out.
On vinyl.
Those guys weren't wrong. Why do we want to be a part of it? Because that's what they did. And they did it with style. I want us to get to the point of realizing these guys had style, but they did it with such class. They did it because they enjoyed it. And as you get older, you want to enjoy what you're doing. You don't want to just do it. You want to embellish in it, get like entrenched. The full experience. And sometimes that requires time. Carve out time to truly grow into your best experience. And, I know Marty for sure. Marty has people that come over to the house all that time, and he spreads his knowledge on that stuff. He's increasing their experience. So hopefully they can increase someone else's experience, right? And I think that's what we're supposed to do, right? Make sure that you're not only doing your gig, but you're helping to grow someone else's. And then we can grow into a true community of people that respect each other and help each other, and understanding everybody's palate's not the same, but their experience might be. Don't think your palate will make their experience better. You're giving them tools so they can make their experience better, and it doesn't have to be equal to 9. If I can do 2 hours with my buddy, that 2 hours is awesome. If he enjoys it and I enjoy it, it don't have to be the same. Trust me, every time I golf and I'm with Ken, I'm throwing whiskey in there, and I know there's a Diet Pepsi coming in. We're not woke, so we don't drink Coke, but we're doing Diet Pepsi. And we go through and do that. And sometimes when he's not looking, I might throw a little splash or two in his drink, and he thinks it's like 50-50, and it probably went for like 75-20
today.
So
I took
today
a
on
big
the golf
swig. I'm
course.
like,
Today on the golf course, he had something. I was like, oh, did I forget to tell you?
My bad.
Oops. increasing his palate is what I thought it was. He thought it was like inhalation of like alcohol.
That's going down way too easy.
What?
Cooper's Craft.
What we had on the course today.
That's going way too easy.
So 2 minutes left. Is there a variety pack that you would recommend? Variety pack of cigars? John, are you talking about cigars? If there is, I absolutely. I can tell you right now exactly what that'd be. If you're talking about cigars,
This was canned back. In
so it's
April.
really simple, right? Just send me an email, bourbonbattalion@gmail.com. And for anybody out there, right, I'm bourbonbattalion@gmail. You can send me an email. Yeah. John, I will tell you, I will give me a day. Let me look up the link that I have and send me an email and I'll shoot you a link to the variety pack. And the nice thing is that this variety pack covers a gamut of wrappers, which gives you a really good opportunity to pair different whiskeys to the wrappers to find your palate, right?
Which is cool. But
Which is really cool. So, no. They're trying to whisper, but they're old. And I'm not that old.
8.
What's up, A? We can't say that. Moose Hunter. Well, Alex not in here tonight. I don't think I have any Canadians here tonight, do I? No.
Cool.
Yeah, cool. Take off, A. I got this beer, A, and it had a mouse in it. I want free beer. As he's jamming a mouse in the bottle. So, all right, guys. Thanks so much for jumping on tonight. I really appreciate you guys. Yeah, definitely send me an email. I have Patreon. Thanks to my Patreon people. They're listed across there. I have a new one that joined before I got this updated. I appreciate it. I promise you for the Patreons, there's some exciting things coming you don't know about. So just be diligent. Stay the course. Some cool things are happening. And suck it, Battalion. Suck it, Schwang, because you do suck it, Schwang. You freaking bathroom shower freaking whore. Oh, love you, brother. What's up, Marty? Yeah, that's great, Daniel. All right, guys, it's 9 o'clock. The Mash and Drum is on. Jump over there. He's got some cool stuff going on. And as always, listen, somewhere in your life you've been taken care of. Someone's done something good for you. Pay it forward. Be good to those that are good to you. And remember, everybody's nice. Everybody's just waiting for someone to be nice to you. Until the next time, Battalion out.